Officers were just in the courtroom. I think he's talking to one of the attorneys.
Yeah, that's
How is he doing, and how are you prepared to defend him?
Well, I mean, starting out with the notion that he's innocent until proven guilty, which is a rubric of our society in this country, number one. Number two, I know that there's been a lot of statements about Mr. Bean in the press over the last, month, and a lot of those statements are misleading about the person that he is. Mr. Bean has been nothing but a respectful, a good young man throughout his life. And on that particular night, you look at an isolated incident and try to measure the person. And so there are a lot of statements about him as a person that are just flat out untrue. And you look at the level of involvement of each individual defendant. And in that particular case, he was doing his job, no more, no less. He never struck anybody. He never did anything other than his job. Right now, we're in a posture that I've never seen a person charged before anybody knows the cause of death. There's no definitive information regarding cause of death at all. And so we got 5 individuals charged with murder. I represent one, and it's an honor because at this point in time, I've never seen people jump to conclusions about an isolated part of a 2-minute excerpt about what was supposed to have happened on a particular night. And I stand by the notion that right now due process in this matter has not taken place properly. There should be justice for Tyre Nichols, absolutely. But I also stand by the fact that I am going to demand justice for Tadarius Bean.
Has Mr. Bean made any statement to you? Written any statement? We heard from
Is Mr. Bean?
From Mr. Ballin. His client wrote a statement. Has your client wrote a statement?
We've gone through a lot of information. There was a lot of information given on the front end during the time that when he was an active police officer and they were doing their inquiries at that time. There was certain information that was gleaned, from my understanding, administratively, but there's been no follow-up statements as of right now.
Sir, what in that video tells us that your client, Tadarius Bean, is innocent?
Tadarius Bean, according to the video, was seen apprehending a person after.
Every last one of them beating that man.
Yeah.
That's murder.
Carry on, sir.
See, like we said, we saw the same thing.
What in that video
murder,
tells us that your client, Tadarius Bean, is innocent?
Say that once again. I can't hear it because you got people that are part of the press that are saying things.
We've all seen the video. What in that video tells us that your client, Tadarius Bean, is innocent?
Tadarius Bean never touched him in any way, striking him. Period. Tadarius Bean has the ability, as a law enforcement officer, to make a lawful arrest based off of a call coming in. And so at this time, that's where we're standing right now. That Tadarius Bean was doing his job at that time, and he never struck him. And there has been no information that we have seen as of right now that indicates that there's any sort of information that we can rely on to say that it's murder.
Why didn't he intervene? Why didn't he intervene and stop his colleagues beating a man to death?
I think you hear his voice consistently saying, "Sit up, man, so you can get air," etc., and things like that. I think you hear him consistently saying that. And Tadarius Bean at no point in time did anything that would be different from a person who's doing his job.
He didn't stop his colleagues killing a man, though.
I'm sorry?
He didn't stop his colleagues killing a man.
So,
why didn't he intervene and say, enough, stop?
Right. I want to hear you answer that.
I want to hear...
That's his duty as a police officer.
I'm going to do something rare. Have you ever made an arrest?
No.
Have you ever jumped out of a car trying to apprehend somebody who you think might have committed a carjacking, a robbery, a rape, a kidnapping? Have you ever done that?
I've never stood by and let one of my colleagues kill a man.
And if a person gets called on a scene, you have a duty as a police officer to respond. If you're not on that, and to be absolutely clear, Mr. Bean was not. Mr. Bean was not on the first scene, so we don't know what happened.
Does Mr. Bean regret any of his actions that night?
I'm sorry?
Does he regret any of his actions that night?
I think at this point he probably regrets being a Memphis police officer. on that night, because had he not been, he wouldn't have been called to do his job.
Is there anything he'd like to say to the family of Tyree Nichols today?
I won't say what Mr. Bean says regarding the family. I will say that from my heart regarding the family, anytime you have a young man that dies, it's sad and it's a horrible thing, and we don't want that to happen. So, but as far as where we are as of right now, we're trying to see whether or not a person can get justice the way that anybody else can, and that's my job.
To get up for air the same as River and 8?
I think at the time that at the conclusion of making the arrest, from my understanding, there were people that were on the scene that are professional health renderers, from my understanding. So to say that, yes, ma'am, I watched the video. Go ahead.
Have you seen all of the video of this?
I've seen the. I have.
Okay, so how many hours is it? I mean, have they turned everything over?
I'm sorry, ma'am. I could.
DA Mulroy says that there's 20 hours, essentially, of video. Have you seen all of that?
No, nobody's seen it. We'll see it at the same time.
Will you put in a motion to preserve all of the video from the route?
Right, we want that. Yes, we're joining that motion. I think one has been filed.
You're going to join that motion. How much more video do you think can be collected? Obviously, it's video that could possibly tell more of this story, of this chase on foot between Tyree Nichols and the 5 officers, or at least 2 or 3 of those officers. Do we know if your client, Mr. Bean, was one of the officers chasing after Tyree Nichols on foot?
I apologize. I just can't hear the whole question. I'm sorry. Just say it one more time.
Do we know if your client, Mr. Tadarius Bean, is one of the officers possibly chasing Tyree Nichols on foot?
Oh, during the second scene. My client is on the second scene.
Right. But when going to the second scene, do we know if he's one of the officers chasing?
Not going to the second scene, but at the second scene, yes, he's doing his job.
Okay. So
there's a suggestion that there's a connection somehow between Tyree Nichols and the officers involved, that they knew each other, and there was a reason why those officers might have wanted to inflict violence on Tyree Nichols. There are rumors. Can you comment on that?
I haven't seen anything to suggest any truth to any of that at all. Period. I haven't seen any of that.
What's your name, sir?
John Keith Perry.
John Keith Perry, and you represent Tadarius Bean.
Yes, sir.
Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you all.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.